All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of time on a map you probably think you know. We're talking about the land we now call Algeria. But before it was a country, before the Sahara was even a desert, an incredible history was already unfolding. We're going to explore the very first chapter of that story, the deep, ancient origins of North Africa's indigenous peoples.
So, here's the big question, right? Who was here first? It sounds simple, but the answer is this huge, complex puzzle. And we're going to piece it together using clues from ancient texts, from archaeology, and even from our own DNA. To start cracking this mystery, we've got to go way, way back.
First things first, you need to completely forget the Sahara you have pictured in your head. During the last ice age, it wasn't a desert at all. It was this lush, green landscape, and people were living all across North Africa. But then, around 7,000 years ago, the climate began to change. The world got warmer, and that green paradise started turning into the desert we know today, pushing its people out into other regions.
So, our first clues about who these people were don't actually come from their own records. They come from the diaries and inscriptions of their powerful neighbors. To understand who they were, we first have to see them through the eyes of the ancient world's superpowers, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The first time these folks pop up in the historical record is way back around 1300 BC. We've got these Egyptian stone tablets that talk about a people living next door called the Libos. Centuries later, the Greek historian Herodotus expands on that name. He starts using Libyans to describe basically everyone living west of Egypt. And then, of course, the Romans arrive. And being the Romans, they get even more specific, mapping out nomadic tribes they called ghettos in the desert, and more settled groups called Moors and Numids.
Okay, so you can see all these different labels from different civilizations. But here is the most important thing to remember. Libys, Libyans, Moors, these are all external names. They are nicknames given to them by outsiders. It's not what these people actually called themselves. It's kind of like trying to understand a family by only reading what their neighbors wrote about them. You're only getting one side of the story.
So if those were just labels from the outside, who were these people really? And where did they come from? Well, this question has led to three major theories, three different attempts to solve the great puzzle of Berber origins.
The first theory is really special because it comes from the people themselves. It's their own history, passed down from generation to generation through stories. These oral traditions were finally written down by Arab historians during the Middle Ages. And they weren't just making stuff up, they were recording the collective memory of the entire Maghreb. This is our first real insider's perspective.
And these traditions are just full of fascinating clues. They trace their entire ancestry back to a single man named Amazigh, who they say was a descendant of Canaan from Palestine. Now here's where it gets really interesting. There's a potential linguistic link. You've heard of the famous Canaanite king, Goliath, right? Well, the word for king in the Berber language, Tamazid, is Agualed. Goliath, Agualed. Could that just be a coincidence? Maybe. Another tradition points to a king from Yemen named Ifrikos. The key takeaway, though, is that their own history points east, toward the Near East.
All right, let's switch gears to a totally different approach. With French colonization came modern science, specifically paleoanthropology. Archaeologists started digging and uncovering ancient skeletons and tools, and what they found suggested two distinct prehistoric cultures, which they named the Ibero-Maurasians and the Capsians.
And this discovery, of course, sparked a huge debate. Did the Caspians, who also seem to have come from the Near East, just show up and completely replace the earlier Ibero-Maurasians? Or did the two groups mix together and become one? Or, and this is another possibility, were they actually the same people, just at different stages of their evolution? Scientists are still arguing about this one.
And that brings us to our third and most recent attempt to solve the puzzle, genetics. Modern DNA studies let us look directly into the deep past that's written in our own biology. And the results? They point to a population that came mainly from the Middle East thousands of years ago, and they show close relations to people from the Levant, from Egypt, and even from Southern Europe.
And this is the truly mind-blowing part. Our newest, most high-tech science seems to be confirming the oldest theory of all. Those stories that were passed down by word of mouth for centuries. You've got two completely different forms of evidence separated by thousands of years, and they're both pointing to the same origin, the Near East. It's just a powerful reminder that history isn't only found in books. Sometimes it's carried in our stories, and literally, in our blood.
Now, while the Berbers were the foundation of North Africa, another people arrived who would change the course of history forever. And their arrival wasn't some slow burn. No, it was like a cultural explosion. Let's talk about the Phoenicians. The sources we have describe it perfectly.
Their arrival created a real big bang. These were incredible seafaring merchants from what is now Lebanon. And they didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, they brought technology, and they introduced a whole new way of life.
You can actually watch this transformation happen in 5 key steps. First, they just set up simple trading posts along the coast. But those posts didn't stay small. They grew into the first real cities in the region. And with those cities, the Phoenicians brought their greatest invention, the alphabet. This was a total game changer for trade, for law, for culture. This sparked this amazing mixing of cultures, creating a unique Punic Berber civilization. And finally, all of those elements laid the groundwork for the first organized states to finally emerge.
And you know, this illustrates a pattern that's still true today. The whole region became bilingual, with people speaking Berber right alongside Punic, which is what we call the Phoenician language and culture that developed there. It's a dynamic that mirrors the present, with Berber and Arabic coexisting. North Africa has been a multicultural, bilingual region for thousands of years.
So, you take all of these developments, the ancient Berber roots plus the Phoenician Big Bang, and it all leads to a massive political evolution, the rise of the first large, organized Berber kingdoms.
So, around 300 BC, local Berber groups look at the political model they learned from the Phoenicians, the city-state, and they decide to scale it up. They form these huge confederations, which eventually turn into 2 great rival kingdoms.
So in the east, you had the kingdom of the Massilides. Their capital was at Cette, and they were really heavily influenced by the great Punic superpower of Carthage. Then, to their west, you had their rivals, the kingdom of the Massaesyls. Their territory was actually bigger, more agricultural, but they were also a bit further away from all the hustle and bustle of the Punic cities.
And it was the rivalry between these 2 powerful Berber states that acted like a furnace, forging something new, something bigger and stronger than either of them. The first great unified state of the region, the famous kingdom of Numidia.
The stage is now set. You have 2 rival kingdoms born from ancient roots, but forged by outside influence, and they are on an absolute collision course. An entire civilization hangs in the balance. The question isn't just if they'll go to war, but what will be born from the ashes when they do.